Good evening, everybody. I'd like to start, call to order the regular Board of Finance meeting for Monday, April 20th, 2020 to order. Our first item on the agenda tonight is public forum. We are obviously going to do the best we can in public forum. Everybody who has entered the meeting is on listen only. Everybody who has just entered is muted and will be unmuted if they'd like to say something in public forum. I do request that everybody who does decide that they would like to speak, should be a raise hand tool. Please use that tool, and then we will unmute you, state your name and address, and we would like to limit you as much as possible to 3 minutes. And do we have anybody who is wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Do we see any raised hands? I'm looking at a lot of images right now. I don't see anybody with a raised hand. If not, we will continue on with the meeting. Item number 2, approved minutes of the March 16th, 2020 regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I believe there's a couple of corrections that I had regarding the minutes. One, I believe it was the only one that I saw was under item number 7 in the vote. On the bonding item, I believe that Mr. Trotta had opposed. That confirmed, I believe. Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
What are we looking at now? Comments on what?
Meeting minutes for March 16th, regular meeting?
March 16th?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had one. I didn't know where we were with the performance contracting. I saw that it was there and that it was delayed the previous month. I wondered whether there was any progress on it this month.
Is that in reference to the regular meeting?
Yeah, the regular meeting of 3/16.
I'll tell you what, let's bring that up in the next agenda item of standing building.
Okay, good. That's just as well.
Okay, excellent. Any further comment?
I had just had one on item 5 at the top of page, or the middle of page 4 under expenses, where it says, Ms. Malavasi said the legal budget is lower than anticipated, but union negotiations are coming up. The budget is at 67%, encumbered at 67% through the year. I wasn't sure if that second at 67% was superfluous or should be in there.
What page are you on again, John? I'm sorry, Jeff. It's Jeff Beatty who's speaking.
Page 4. That's okay. It's page 4, item 5, under expenses.
Yeah, got it.
The sentence says that the budget is at 67% encumbered.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I believe that we could double check that. I believe that it was 67, probably 67% expended at 67% through the year.
Mike, I think Mary Jane has a comment.
Yeah. Hold on. I got you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it was just coincidence that at 67% through the year, they're including encumbrances, there were 67%. So it should say 67% expended, I believe, at 67% through the year.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mike, I'll just confirm section 7, I was opposed. I actually had sent an email about that, and I'm glad you caught.
Right, right. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, great. Are there any other comments? If not, this is, I sent you all a message yesterday that we're going to go through roll call on all the votes. So what we'll do is, as I do the roll call, just if you're in favor, say aye. If you're opposed, say nay or abstain. So with that being said,
Actually, Mike, before you call the vote, if I could just raise one other item.
go ahead, Jeff.
On number 12, our vote to adjourn the meeting, I'm pretty sure that Veronica did not oppose adjourning the meeting at 9:07 p.m. I don't want to speak for her.
All right. Well, yeah, that makes
Nice
sense.
catch.
All good. Thank you for that, Jeff. All right. So with all those comments, I'll go right down the table. Ms. Scanlon,
I can't. Okay, sorry. I was just waiting.
we're
I.
good. You were an aye, I take it?
Yep. That was an I.
Okay.
Sorry, you had to unmute me. So.
Yeah, now I realize that. So I'm going to go right through and make sure you're all unmuted as I go through. Ms. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Gammerman,
Yes,
I'm an aye. Mr. Ailes, Mr. Beatty,
Aye.
Mr. Trotta,
aye with the corrections.
and Mr. Hartman.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Item number 3, correspondence. Standing Building Committee minutes. Before I go into that, I did read in here that Jeff Hedberg may be joining our meeting. I'm not sure if he's on or not. I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't. This is very unique, but I don't know if he's on or if there's somewhere he could raise his hand if he is actually on, because he is a representative of the Standing Building Committee. But I do not see a Jeffrey Hedman on the call. And I don't see any raised hands indicating that he's here. So that being said, are there any comments or questions regarding the Standing Building Committee minutes of April 7th?
yeah, I'll revisit my comment from the minutes over to here. The Standing Building is now talking about minor changes, and I thought we had some large issues of liability and responsibility in there. And now it just says there are small items in 5. So I wondered what happened with the settlement. We agreed that that there was to be some adjustments made because of the failures, let's call it, or shortcomings on performance contracting. And I don't see very much in there on performance contracting. Has this all gone away? Has it been settled? And is this, they're talking about minor stuff here.
Well, I mean, this was from as of April 7th, which is actually for us pretty recent. Usually we get a little bit delayed on the meeting minutes, but it appears that regarding those items, there are small punch list items that are remaining, and then the Baldwin and Melissa Jones solar projects, as well as the Baldwin HVAC work, will take place this summer. Other than that, I don't have any other information. It's something we could certainly ask
Right.
Linda, if there's something you could ask Cliff on our behalf, the status of the performance contract. That would be great. I'll unmute you just to make sure that you can now mute and unmute yourself.
Sure, I'll check with Cliff and follow up with you. Oh, Mary Jane's raising her hand too.
Got her. Mary Jane, go ahead.
I do know, I had a conversation with Cliff. We did request an extension through the end of the year to get the punch list items done through the, for the contract. I can't answer as to what they are or why, but for through the bank, we did request an extension through the end of the year.
Okay.
So Mike, I had kind of similar questions about that and kind of wonder if our first selectman can tell us if any of our efforts to maybe collect reimbursements along the performance contract are still in play. I guess I would assume the courts are frozen on these issues because of the virus.
There we go.
There we are. Thank you, Mike. Jonathan, no, nothing has transpired. We still have the opportunity to realize penalties for non-performance once we have the metrics in place. But until those punch lists and those projects are finished, the full metrics are not in place. We still reserve the right and contractual right for subsidies if they fail to meet the targeted levels.
Okay, I've got maybe a couple more questions on the standing building
Good.
minutes. Item 10, I can't say I've got some bearing on this, but they said at the end of it that they're looking for some kind of approval from the Board of Finance. I was wondering if anybody could expand on this. This is in regards to item 10,
Yes.
page 4.
Jonathan, I had the same question.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, it's more of a question and more of a clarification on that process. The building committee was looking to move forward with that project because it's going to be part of the $2.6 million bond resolution that we were going to send to the voters. So they were going to go through and get the bid documents together and push forward upon the assumption that it would be approved. Matt, I'm wondering, could you just clarify the process on the bonding question? Because I know, and the reason I'm asking also is I did read something, I thought it was in a webinar today regarding the percentage. There's like a 1%, I don't know if that applies to us in terms of bonding, and if it's any more than 1% of the total budget, then there's a different process. I'm not sure, Matt, if you could clarify.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The one of the governor's executive order, I'm not sure which one, he's issued 28 or 29 of them at this point, dealt with capital projects and special appropriations. As you may recall from our earlier conversations, that the governor's authorized the Board of Finance to make the ultimate decision on the budgets. They did not allow for that same process to occur with respect to special appropriations. It was sort of the budget only. So our procedures are still in place relative to approval of anything over the 1%. I think you may remember the 1% rule in terms of transfers on the Board of Finance for any activities with transfers. If it rises to the level of over 1%, you have to go to town meeting for same. So that 1% is consistent with the town meeting requirements. But at this point, you are not authorized to move the question related to the bonding. You cannot approve that until such time as we can conduct public meetings.
I'll just comment that that's Executive Order 7S, Section 7. Anybody wants to take a look at it.
Good.
Right. Thank you. Jonathan, is there anything else you had? Because I had one other comment, and it's under 14.1.
I had to
The
say,
Windows.
Yeah, and
Seem to
what
be
I'm
falling
bringing
out or
up.
something.
What's that?
It seems like the windows are actually falling out or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the building committee seems to be going about the right process, which I wasn't, that's not a surprise to me. What I did see in here that I would like to take back to the building committee is that it indicated right in the middle that the design for the project was completed by a firm. Right now I'll leave the firm out, but completed by a firm which no longer is in business. It is my understanding that they are still in business. They have moved and they may be going by a different name. But I would like that to be brought to Cliff's attention, Cliff Gurnham's attention, our facility director with the schools, and he could have a conversation with me. It's a firm that I'm aware of, but I was surprised to see they're no longer in business when evidently I believe that they are, just under a different location.
that's very significant because there's a $53,000 cost in going to another firm to complete that project. And if we could recover some of that money from the unnamed firm, which is named, by the way, in the minutes, I won't mention it because you don't want to mention it. But
I'd rather not.
okay,
All right,
I'd rather not. It's on record. I'd rather not.
that's fine.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Matt. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with me privately, since you don't want to disclose it on the air.
Yeah.
I am very confident that our construction attorney, Jeff D'Onofrio, has a pretty good grasp of these kind of things. It may well be that they're doing business as another entity,
Right.
in addition to a different location, which means there may not be any assets to go after. But if you would forward that information along to us, we'll be happy to provide it to Mr. D'Onofrio so he can pursue it. And by the way, at this morning's Board of Selectmen meeting, we authorized the award of a contract for the repairs to those windows at Adams Middle School to a company that can be named Millennium Builders through one of the state contracts in the amount of $53,113.86. And that was approved unanimously this morning.
And just kind of go to your point about, recouping money. Honestly, I don't think we're going to recoup much, if any, money from that firm that I will not name. But they might have had information regarding the process and the design that could have helped. So that's the only reason I brought it up.
Well, Cliff seemed to think there was some possibility of recovery.
Well,
Okay.
if someone still exists, be nice to get the info from them if they have it.
Mike, I got one more thing on standing building, if you could allow it.
Go ahead.
This has just seemed really positive. Item 11, page 5, I think in regards to the repurposing of the old science wing, it looks like Mr. Gurman and the standing building committee have found another way to do the HVAC system in that building for a savings of $350,000, if I'm reading this correctly. And that just seemed really, really positive if it's going to be possible and it comes to fruition. But I just wanted to point that out. I guess the bad news is, though, that the project was running $200,000 over budget. But it looks like if this is going to work, that could result in $350,000 to the positive. Am I reading that right? It was such good news, I almost wasn't sure it was true.
It is. It's a fairly new system. I don't know the details on it. I know that our firm has come across this company before, and it is a newer system that's been out there, but it has been very highly touted by a lot of clients. I won't go into the details of it, but the company is known to save money based on their controls. So.
All right. Well, hats off to them for coming up with some great savings like that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
It's Veronica.
Gotcha.
On the going back to Adams Windows for $53,000, do we know where the funding for this is going to come from?
Mary Jane?
The funding for that particular part of the project is coming from current bonded funds. We were able to reappropriate some of the money that were in place for a similar project at one of the other schools.
Was the original bond still open on the Adams Middle School windows? Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. I take that back because this is really old. This is going back to,
Yeah, 2009.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that wouldn't be open. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that was one of the ones that we recently closed out. This one, I don't have it in front of me. I think it's a 13-14 bond that had funds available.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. My only last comment on this is very good to see what appears to be a full complement on the Standing Building Committee finally. I counted 7 people present on this at the Standing Building Committee. So kudos to the town to get people on that committee.
Mr. Chairman, kudos go to Dave DeMeo, who since becoming active on that board a year and a half ago, has recruited members to that board.
He's picked a good group.
I guess he's been able to do a modicum of arm twisting, so.
Yeah. Moira, I see you laughing. I know your husband's one of them, so. Okay. If not, anything else? Otherwise, we'll move over to Pension Committee minutes. Anything on Pension Committee?
I've got a question.
Jonathan, go ahead.
Go figure, right?
Go
So
ahead.
I saw something that just a little alarming, obviously, because of what's going on with the economy as a result of fighting the invisible enemy here. I think our finance director noted that we had 66 million approximately in the pension fund, and now we're at the time of the minutes we were at 57 million. And I'm wondering if that's stabilized or what our balance in the pension fund might be now.
Madam Mary Jane.
Yeah.
ahead.
I don't have the new figures right in front of me. I could certainly look them up while we're on the call, but we did have an uptick the last time that we looked at the numbers. The pension committee receives an email from me on a weekly basis with an update of where the numbers are instead of looking at them just on a monthly basis. When we met this past month, we were able to see, I believe it was a $1.7 million increase in the span of 2 weeks, but the numbers are starting to go back up, and we're starting to recoup some of our losses.
Mary Jane and Mr. Chairman, I pulled that report up that you submitted last Friday, and it is back to, it was 61,911, so almost 62 million.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Good to know.
It's a luxury of being at my desk.
Are you social distancing?
Yeah. Wait a second. Where's my mask?
Where
Oh, I
is
got it right
everybody?
here. There we go.
There you go.
I'm distancing
Well,
from myself.
in 3 minutes, you might need one. I think the latest executive order is you should wear one if you are going to be too close to people now.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm reading that right, so that's
Yep.
a new order.
Anything else on pension?
Nope.
All right. Moving on, item number 4, review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for March 2020. I know we have Linda. I think I've already unmuted Moira. I see you. I'm going to unmute you.
Yep.
Hi, Moira. Hi, Linda.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all your faces, even if it is remotely.
Yes.
I'll just go over the financial report for the March 2020 Board of Education budget. Expenditures for the month of March were $4,731,882.90. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of March were 69.29% of the budget as compared to 69.67% in the prior year. Revenue for March was $10,706.25, which included $5,376.25 for Medicaid and $5,330 from pre-K tuition. Salaries for the month, the percent of budget expended approximates the prior year. Employee benefits, the percent of budget expended is higher than the prior year. The life insurance line is higher than the prior year due to a lower budget for the current year. Purchase services is the percent of budget is less than the prior year. Tuition, the percent of budget expended is less than the prior year, and this variance is really the result of the timing of payments. Supplies and materials, the percent of budget expended is higher than the prior year. Custodial supply line is over in part due to the many supplies needed to address the COVID-19 virus. And I know that we talked about this in our previous meeting, and I know that Cliff is keeping track of all expenses related to our response in terms of the Board of Ed's budget, with the hopes that maybe we can recoup some of that funding due to FEMA grants and what other sources. But for now, we're just keeping a running tally of that. Capital, the percent of budget expend is higher than the prior year. The equipment and structural variance is a result of the due date of payments for our technology lease. Transportation is the percent of budget expended approximates the prior year. The warrant we are submitting is a total of all payments for the month, which we list alphabetically. The total of payments listed on the warrant is $2,120,028. I realize we have a pretty full agenda, so I won't go into too many more details than that unless there are questions from those in the meeting.
Just had a question for you generally on the tuition factor. whereas Linda in her cover note pointed out that we were, that last year at this point, we were $640,000 over. And this year it's 150. Considering the adjustments and the whole impact of the coronavirus on budgets, do we have any sense as to where we are in relation to last year? I mean, are we at the same level? I know you said some of the invoices had not come in. Are we running higher, lower? Where are we?
So for tuition, we are lower than we were last year. We're not anywhere near the $600,000 over budget that we were last year. Right now, we're still saying about the same we were as last month, so about $150,000 over budget. There are going to be some adjustments due to little pieces of the tuition for each student that we're not going to be paying because of the way that the distance learning and some of the support services are being administered. But we're going to be somewhere around the $150,000 at this point over budget for tuition. Nothing quite like last year.
And that's assuming all of the costs that we're going to have in with distance learning and special needs and the rest.
Yes, I think, Paul, did you want to say something to that?
Oh, wait a minute, hold on. Give it a second. There you go, you're on.
Thank you, Mike. That's right, Ken. Just as we're continuing to provide distance services to the students enrolled in our regular schools, most of these special ed organizations that we contract with are continuing to provide services, so we're continuing to pay those contracts. There's been little impact because of COVID. There will be some, but it will be minimal.
So the children are having access to these special services?
They're having access in a distant, it's going to be impacted. It's not going to be the same services they would be receiving if they attended in person, but they're receiving some service in much the same way that our students are continuing to receive a service, but a very different service through the distance learning structures.
Good to know.
Okay.
That concludes my report.
Just as other people are looking for questions, I had one regarding, of course, now I'm trying to find it. It was in the meeting minutes regarding, and it came up a couple times. First time I saw it was under policy committee regarding the waiving of tuition for children of the Board of Education employees who were not Guilford residents. That came up a couple places. I'm just wondering regarding that policy and what's being discussed, what is the cost impact for the Board of Education on that? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of dollars in waiving tuition?
Can you unmute Paul so he can respond to that one, Mike, please?
Yep. I've unmuted. There you go. You should be good.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
We have tabled that conversation at the board level at this time. That request came up during two of our most recent negotiations from both the teachers group and the administrators group. The board thought it would be more appropriate to have that conversation in public through the policy process rather than behind closed doors of negotiations. Essentially, there would be no or very limited financial impact. The way that other communities have approached that benefit for their employees is to always make sure that there are space available limiting language, that there's space available limiting language in the agreement. And should the students bring any additional costs, for instance, special educational costs, those would be borne by the parent, not by the community. But all of that is what you see in other communities' policy. We were just beginning that conversation. I think the policy committee had talked about it once in a very preliminary fashion. We were talking about scheduling some evening conversations, some public discussions, and then we wound up in the situation we find ourselves in now. So at this point, the conversation is tabled.
Okay, thank you for that update. I also noticed that professional development seemed to be lagging behind on the percentages. And that actually, there's an amount that's encumbered there as well. It's not a big amount, but I was just wondering if that, what would that was impacted by?
I think on these reports, that was simply a matter of timing. And now that we are in this distance setting, those are situations that we are reevaluating. Some of that PD we can continue to engage in at a distance. Much of it has been shifted to provide immediate support for teachers, developing the technological savvy that they need to grow to be able to conduct their distance learning. But I think what you're seeing now is an artifact from while we were still in session, and it was just a matter of timing. We had some PD that was scheduled for the end of the school year. We're reevaluating those costs at this time.
Okay,
Some of that may end up not being expended.
great, thanks. I only had one other question, and then I'll be all set. There were a couple, and this probably has happened numerous times, and I just noticed it this time, and it's on the warrant, page 5. There's a number of Eversource, and what happens when there's 4 entries for smaller amounts? For example, this is at Lathrop House, and there's 4 for the same exact time period. Why does that occur? When there's 4 different?
Because there's multiple meters.
Meter.
It's not one meter for the entire building.
Okay. Simple question.
It's okay.
Just want to make sure, because I was looking at it like it's all the same building, but it's 4 meters. Okay, so thank you.
I think I might have 2 questions, Mike, if it's okay, for the superintendent.
But
So the first question is a little odd. I'm just wondering if any of the staff is eligible for unemployment. I would think most of them probably are not, and if maybe they might have done financially better with the enhanced unemployment.
Our interpretation of the governor's executive order was that we were to maintain staff on pay to every extent practicable, I believe was the language of the executive order. So obviously off the top, teachers and administrators simply wouldn't be. They're working full-time schedules. They're just doing it from home rather than from the classroom. Custodians continue to report to work. Our food service providers continue to report to work. Paraprofessionals are continuing to provide service electronically. Nurses are continuing. So I think the quick answer is no. It was our intention. It was obviously the sense of the community to try to keep as many of our employees whole early on. And following on the heels of the executive order, I think that it would make most of our people not qualify for unemployment. I don't think that they would be doing better. I don't think unemployment would ever bring you to a level where you're receiving more than you were receiving in your base salary.
Well, I'm not going to say I understand the program perfectly. It just came out, but I think they give like an extra $600 for some period of time, and it works out to a pretty reasonable amount of money for someone who's kind of a low wage worker.
I haven't read all the details either, Jonathan, but yeah. I would be surprised if it brought you to a benefit level that was above your salary. The intent of the executive order, though, was to keep as many Connecticut employees off the unemployment rolls as possible, and that's what most municipalities and most school systems have done.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Matt.
If I could chime in here. Jonathan, we've also been confronted with that very same paradigm. Actually, it came from a part-time employee, and Mitchell nodded his head on this, relative to someone who's working 12 or 14 or 16 hours a week, who could, and we've gone through the various literature related to the federal programs. An individual would be able to collect, if we were to lay them off, they would be able to collect the appropriate amount that they would get prorated for their salary from the state of Connecticut. But you're right, that $600 would be on top of what they would get in the state of Connecticut unemployment compensation. At this point, my position is that compensation is reserved for those who are in need of it. This is not an opportunity to game the system and provide folks with benefits that are meant for other folks, or those folks who are actually not working and can't work. So at this point, on the town side, we are still paying all of our part-time employees, and we are not, I'm not planning on proceeding with that type of activity.
Well, I was also kind of contemplating the sharing of the burden of the stay-at-home orders between the state and the municipalities. I have one other question. I may have lost track because the executive orders seem to be coming out almost every day, but I think at the current time, school is canceled till May 20th, I think. And if the kids were to return to school, would we be ready for that, Dr. Friedman, or would we even consider maybe making the school year longer if they were able to come back?
So the bottom line is yes, we would be ready for them and we would welcome them with open arms. We would not be extending the school year at this time. One of the very first executive orders waived the 180-day requirement, and our final day at this point is locked in at June 17th. We would be thrilled if we could have them back. I'm not exactly sure what it would look like. We've already, we're looking at what final exams would look like. We're looking at what the end of the year would look like. I was listening to a conversation today where there is suggestions that school might be back in session, but still with limits of groups of no larger than 50 students gathered. Well, we run lunch waves of 300 students at the high school. And so we're open to that. We will figure it out. We'd like nothing better than to have them back, but we will not be extending the school year. And I couldn't tell you exactly what it would look like until I have more information.
Well, obviously it's a public health issue that has to be decided if they even come back. But I did speak to a lot of residents, and they appreciate the distance learning. But I think almost all of them agreed that school's better if the kids actually go. I don't know if that's across all people, but definitely the ones that I ran into, recently in the last couple of weeks.
I would stipulate to that. We would rather have our students in classroom. What we're doing with distance learning, I'm proud of what we're doing. I am in awe of what the teachers are doing, but it is a stopgap, and it does not replace the learning that takes place in a classroom when students are with each other, working with each other. We believe that learning is a social activity, and we're doing the best we can under these conditions. We would take them back in a heartbeat.
Understood.
And I would certainly consult with Dennis Johnson before making any decision about opening our schools locally. Even if there was a release from the governor, we would consult with our local health authorities and neighboring communities before making any decision about opening our schools again.
Prudently so.
Thanks, Jonas.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Anybody else have any questions? Anything further for the
I had a
publication?
question. I had a question, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Jeff.
It's Jeff.
Yep, go ahead.
For now that the schools are closed, what are you projecting for site improvements, building management, and any improvements? Is it going to come in on target, more or less, under budget? What are you going to be able to do to take advantage of the buildings being closed?
We're just now beginning to look at projections through the end of this school year. We're a bit challenged because we've never had to make projections under these circumstances before. So where projections are always, there's always a certain degree of speculation, there's more speculation involved in that now. Site improvement, our goal is to try to do the projects that we can get done. We're taking advantage of the schools being available. We're hoping that we will be able to do some projects at lower costs because we'd be able to do first shift Monday through Friday rather than weekend or evening work, which we're often forced to do during the school year. On the other hand, I don't know if all of our contractors will remain available to us or able to come in and do that sort of work. We're making sure that any of those projects are being done following the guidelines of social distancing, so we're not bringing in large crews to do that work. I just don't know at this point, Jeff. A lot of our projections are very early at this stage. My goal would be that that's an area where we would want to spend down the money and possibly get more work done because of the opportunity, rather than to set those dollars aside. But as I suggested, we do think that there will be some balance at the end of the school year as a result of the closing, particularly if it extends through the end of the year, to Jonathan's question. But that would more likely be in areas like some transportation savings, some fuel savings. We've geared down on electricity and heat in the buildings, possibly some professional development dollars that are not expended. But we're still working on those numbers. We're not confident with the numbers that we're producing at this time. We'll know more as we spend some more time in this set of circumstances.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This could be an optimistically premature question, but there are references in the minutes to New England Road office and the potential savings from $300,000 to $400,000. So there are people who are working on this right now. Has there been any movement at all toward considering the sale of the existing facility on the green?
Lathrop House? No,
Yeah.
I don't think that there's been any, well, I can't speak for the town, but we're not packing boxes and preparing to move out of Lathrop House at this time. The suggestion that the HVAC work that needs to be completed at on New England Road isn't a savings of budgeted dollars. It would bring the projected cost of any future project down, but that project, to my knowledge, hasn't been bid out yet. We're working on some designs. We're working on putting some plans together, but that's not a project that has been bid or has been budgeted at this time. So it's bringing the cost of a future project down. It's not saving currently budgeted dollars.
Understood.
Anybody else? Board of Education?
I have a question about the transition back. So assuming that, let's say we don't go back to school this year at all, what are you projecting as sort of the resources and staffing to be able to get students up to where they should be for the next grade, especially like those big transition grades, like 8th to 9th, 4th to 5th? What are you thinking in terms of the next few months and what that's going to look like?
We appreciate the question. Right now, we really don't know. I mean, when people talk about this being unprecedented times, uncharted waters, everybody's right. What I do know is that pretty much every student in Connecticut and over 95% of students nationwide are currently at home. They're not receiving in-person schooling. I know that when we return next year, it will be to a unique set of circumstances. We've never started a school year before where every single one of our students has missed a portion of the previous school year. We've had individual students who have missed part of a school year because of a personal situation, because of an illness. We know how to support them and bring them forward. We've never started a school year like this before. What I know is that it is very likely that students will have a certain degree of catch-up that will be needed. And again, they're receiving work at home. They're continuing to work at home. It's just not the same.
Right.
In general, the plan would be that the teachers who are rising to the challenge today will rise to that challenge next year. We have talked about differentiation of instruction and an individualization of instruction and meeting the individual child where they are. And there's going to need to be more of that. And we will probably need to look at whole grade level standards and think about how we chunk out those whole grade level standards. At this time, there have been some suggestions of, will we open up a Saturday school? Will we begin school on July 1st rather than September 1st? Right now, I'm not expecting that there will be large structural or calendar changes. I'm expecting that we will make up that lost time, or we will fill in the gaps that some students stumbled into over time. And it will be done slowly and thoughtfully and carefully. And there will have to be a lot of individualization around that. But that's exactly the reason that I worry about the suggestions that are being made in Guilford and all over about reducing a school budget. I'm not joking when I say there's a big part of me that feels like I should be I should be advocating right now to increase our budget because of all the unknowns that we will face next year. I'm not going to do that. We are not in front of you asking you to add money to the school's budget. But we worry about those unknowns and what it will look like. And when I talk about every single child being affected, we know that our neediest kids will be the most affected. So when you get to the students with special needs, that's where the needs are going to be the most pronounced. We worry about those students over a regular summer away. We're going to be very worried about those students after this prolonged absence from school. It's not a complete absence, but they're physically absent. And I know that you've seen local attorneys on the evening news talking about those concerns. I wish I could tell you that we had a more concrete plan. What I know is that we will be going through this with everybody else in the state of Connecticut next year. And we're looking at ways to learn from this experiment with distance learning. How do we leverage what we learned from this as a way to help students make up? But we also want them to come back and be well, right? We don't want to come back and immediately start berating them with evaluations and assessments and telling them how far behind they are. We really do want to welcome them back with open arms and have them be happy and thrilled to be back to their schools, and we'll get them where they need to be over time. You're right, it's the transition years that we will be focusing on. The ninth graders coming in are going to be students that we need to pay special attention to. The fifth graders coming into Baldwin are going to be students that we need to pay special attention to. The first graders coming out of an incomplete kindergarten. So there are certain years where we're going to need to spend more attention. A second grader will make up anything that was missed in third and fourth grade, right? We've got 2 years to make sure that we address any gaps that may have developed. And I apologize for the long answer.
No,
Dr. Friedman? Oh,
And also, I would just interject too, there'll be a social emotional piece,
Absolutely.
that we have to be very cognizant of for every student. So yeah, I concur with what Paula said, and just really realizing that it's like a moving thing and it's changing every day, but just to also keep that in mind, that there's going to be that need as well as the academic piece.
Absolutely.
If I may also add one more thing, again, echoing Dr. Freeman's comments, but one of the things we know when we come back in the fall, we know a lot about where students left in June, right? And there's communication between grade levels and teachers. There's just a piece of the unknown here, which just adds an additional element. So it's not like we're going to take every student and subtract 14 weeks and determine where we think they might be. Because of what Dr. Freeman said and because of what Moira just mentioned, the kids that we might otherwise expect to be in a certain place are going to be differentially affected by this.
Right.
And so there's a level of assessment and evaluation that's going to have to happen. And as Dr. Freeman suggested, not as they walk in the door, but over time, that's going to be very different than a new teacher with a new class coming in September. And we just can't, again, we can't predict in the same way that teachers can often predict based on the prior teacher's report or a child's history. It's going to be a very different experience, and it's going to take additional energy to identify who needs what and then to provide it.
Jonathan?
You need the
Yeah.
resources to do that.
one more small question.
Yeah,
Dr. Freeman
we do.
and Dr. Balistraci, is it possible that the new year or maybe a possible return to school this year will start off with some kind of review of the curriculum, the prior curriculum?
Oh, absolutely. When I talked about reviewing of those grade level standards, yes. I can guarantee you that the third grade teacher will be reassessing where she would normally start on the first day of a traditional third grade and thinking about where's the right place to start and how do I start this year based on the fact that second grade ended so differently than it would normally have ended. And then that applies to every level moving forward. Yes, teachers will be doing a lot of that. We have a benefit in Guilford in that our curricula have always been written with a large degree of professional latitude afforded to teachers to make those kinds of decisions. We've always asked our teachers to differentiate or individualize to a very high degree. We're going to be asking them to do more of that, to stretch more than they've ever been asked to stretch before, because every student is coming in that very different place. And that, to Megan's point, that's different in different grade levels. A second grade teacher has 3 years to think about how to make that adjustment before that child leaves. The fourth grade team has 1 year, they feel before they send that child off. It's really going to be impacting our junior class. Our junior class is going to be finishing this year, coming into their senior year, and there's all of those pressures that the outside world places on your junior year before you come back in senior year and start making those really big choices. To Moira's point, we're going to have to counsel those students and parents to take a deep breath and calm down. It's not just Guilford students who are going to be in that situation. So in some grade levels, we can tell everybody to relax. We've got 13 years to take care of the impact of these 14 weeks. In other grade levels, it's not going to feel like you've got those full 14 years, and there's going to be more stress involved. And that balance between the academic needs and the social emotional needs is going to feel different for some grade levels than it will for others. The freshman class is going to feel like they didn't get their full 2 years at Adams. The freshman teachers will step up and support them and help them make that transition.
But
Also, go ahead, Megan.
so I think when we're thinking about the budget overall, we need to just be cognizant of that in terms of the resources that we hopefully keep in the budget for that.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate the conversation, and we shared with you that New York Times article because, again, these conversations are happening all over. I mean, we're looking at probably, it's going to be certainly the most unusual school year that we've ever faced as a nation. It may very likely be one of the most expensive school years we've ever faced as a nation, and communities all over are then trying to figure out how do you mitigate the tax impact, right? And so there's just two really different concerns that you all have on your table tonight. Our job as the Board of Ed is easy. We get to make one argument, and we'll make it passionately. You have the difficult job of balancing those two very different sets of concerns.
Shall we move on?
I'm enjoying this conversation.
Don't worry, you'll be back. All right. Before we get to item number 5, I'm going to entertain a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of March 2020 in the amount of $4,731,882.90. As you know, I'm going to do a vote by roll call. The only thing I would add is besides aye, nay, abstain, if you have any recusals, please indicate those. Ms. Scanlon.
Aye.
Ms. Walls.
Aye.
Mr. Gammerman.
Aye.
Mr. Ailes. Aye. Mr. Beatty.
Aye.
There you are. Mr. Trotta.
Aye.
Mr. Hartman. Thumbs up. Gotcha. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Moira, thank you for joining as a reviewer. Appreciate it. And Linda, I know you'll be sticking around. Actually, both of you will probably be sticking around. So item number 5, review and approve report of expenditures for town government for March 2020. Mary Jane and Matt.
I think she's muted.
Gotcha. It takes a little, there you go. It takes like 3 seconds after one of us clicks it and then it comes off. So you're all set.
That's because I have to accept it after you click it. So.
Oh. You're all, the floor is yours, as I usually say.
Okay. So I'm going to start with revenues. And you can see where we are today is slightly less than we were a year ago, which you probably have already expected. We have a number of departments that, the building department, the town clerk's office, the ambulance, they all have less people coming to them. So those numbers will be slightly down. The good news is that the bond commission met last week, and I actually watched it live on Zoom like this. And we will be getting the money that has been on hold for about $426,000. That should be coming in within the week. I did confirm today that we there should be no hold whatsoever on the final ECS payment. That should be coming in this month as usual. That's $980,000 that we're expecting for a total of $1.4 million. As you can see from the report, the amount of revenue remaining to meet our budget is just shy of 1.4. So even if we weren't to bring in any other revenue in any of our departments, we would meet our budgeted revenues at 100% for this year. But I do expect that we have other revenues coming in. So that's the good news on that front. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions.
Questions, revenue?
So you kind of answered my question about the state revenue. You do expect it to come in without any kind of glitch or delay.
Correct. Like I said, the bond commission met during that meeting. It was last week sometime. I forget what day I watched it, but they said within 10 days we would get the money. So I'll be expecting that this week. And I did confirm through CCM this morning as well that there should be no holdup on ECS money either. So all of that money should be coming in during the month of April.
Okay, I have an oddball question. I don't usually look too much at this monthly expenses, but I just was reviewing it today, and it just occurred to me that we seem to spend more money as we get farther along in the year. And I was just wondering if that's a regular pattern or if there's any meaning to that. I just kind of noticed today that we spend less money at the beginning of the year and more money as the months go by.
Do you want me to move on to expenses, or we finish it up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did jump to expenses, didn't I?
Mary Jane, why don't you go over expenses and then Jonathan can ask your question again.
Oh,
sure.
I can answer. If we're done with revenue, I'll just move on to Jonathan's
I believe
question.
we're done with revenue.
Maybe I killed revenue by going to expenses so quickly.
Well, on the expense side, we have this similar story. We're a little bit less at this point than we were last year, although all of our offices, as we've already discussed, all of our offices are up and running. There might be some services that aren't happening at full strength. So other than that, all of our offices are spending their money as needed. Capital wise, we kind of have sort of a hold on that, not so much a strong stop, but the Board of Selectmen is reviewing every single request as to its true need right now. Anything that can be held up, we will be doing so. Otherwise, to answer Jonathan's question, the expenses go up and down every month. It really depends on the season, what's going on during the season. It also depends on what months we pay our bond payments. We have 2 large spikes during that time. Otherwise, most departments are pretty steady month to month, but when you take into account some of our larger items, you will see those changes from month to month. If anybody has any questions on expenditures?
This is Veronica. I had a question on the golf course. There was expenses for their concession stand. Did they have an event there, or did something go on?
Earlier in the year, they had an event that raised money. So, and they were also getting ready to open for April 1st, although that hasn't happened.
I guess that was why I was questioning it, because I knew they weren't opened. And so I was wondering why there were, I figure they're getting ready to open, so there's things they need to buy and stuff, but it seemed, out of the ordinary is all.
Veronica, were you talking about expenditures of this month or overall?
This month.
Okay.
I was curious if there's any deltas between revenue and expenses because of COVID-19 for the town. And then maybe how much we have that we may be reimbursed for FEMA. How many expenses might be reimbursed for FEMA.
Well, those are in process of being tracked, right, Mary Jane?
Yes, I was going to bring that up too. Moira had mentioned it. I have that in my notes to discuss. We have been tracking everything that we possibly can. I think I mentioned that at our last meeting. We recently had a Zoom meeting with FEMA where they went over the entire process. I think it was 2.5 hours. At one point, there was 122 people on that Zoom meeting. So if you're having a problem with your 36, you can imagine how the FEMA meeting went. Also spending this week in 2 additional FEMA meetings. FEMA has something new. They have a portal now. Everything will be done online. So we'll be, Linda, get ready because I'm putting you on there and probably Cliff. Like I said, I will be having 2 meetings with them this week to go over how that new system works moving forward. So we're really capturing everything that we possibly can. There is a 75% reimbursement for anything that qualifies. Just today, we signed all the documents necessary to put our application in so that we have our foot in the door when we start building our case for whatever comes up. As we have in the past, the Board of Ed and the town will put their requests together, but we'll work in conjunction to make sure all of that goes in properly.
I have a question regarding the encumbrances on Public Works and Parks and Rec. On Public Works, there's a pretty big amount on the equipment repair and maintenance. I'm assuming that that's going to be spent to take care of the equipment.
Well, most of the larger purchase orders are blanket orders that are placed throughout the year. And, once we start hitting May, we start to look at what purchase orders we are no longer needing. But yes, as far as the vehicles are concerned, we are still maintaining them.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick point on that. Because of the mild nature of the winter, we are anticipating that we will not be fully expending that line item because repairs to the heavy equipment have not been realized, basically due to the fact that we haven't had to work those vehicles very heavily.
Would that also go for road maintenance winter?
Some, yes. As you may recall, there were a bunch of storms that we had to go out and sand and so forth. They didn't rise to the level of big snowstorms, but we were out frequently doing preventative sanding.
Okay. Thank you for that, Matt. And then on Parks and Rec, it's all building maintenance, ground maintenance, and field maintenance. So again, my assumption is those are encumbrances that are blanket encumbrances that will be spent. It's not that the fields are not being taken care of and the grounds, and that all has to continue.
Absolutely. They are still doing all of that. As a matter of fact, they're able to get some more of that done right now,
Ahead of time.
Easier than they would otherwise.
Yeah, right.
Right. There is the possibility that some minor supplies like, the lining of the fields, which typically has to be done frequently during the season as it wears out. There'll be some minor savings relative to some of the supplies. Unfortunately, we probably ordered most of the season's worth prior to the shutting down of all recreational activities, but clearly we would not need to reorder during season.
Okay.
I just have a question about the different work that's being done with the town workers. Is any of it considered non-essential?
No, every department is open for business. in some form or fashion. We have skeleton crews. We have folks alternating days to comply with the governor's order. But in terms of the town function, every department is open. It is just being run with skeleton crews and alternating schedules. So if someone needs a deed process, that can get done. Well, you can't take books out of the library and you can't take classes at Park and Rec. However, Park and Rec is operating the senior services. We've expanded a couple of programs there. The library is offering a variety of distance access technologies and sessions. So everyone is working. Those that can work from home with the appropriate technology are doing so. We deployed some 20 laptops for folks to get remote access. For those who don't have technology at home and don't have any customer interfacing opportunities, they are doing special projects. This is a great opportunity for us to do catch-up work. And actually what I'll do is I have asked my direct reports to start providing weekly reports in terms of the type of work, the extra work that's getting done as a result of the decreased demand on our services.
You know, I mentioned in previous meetings if, you know, workers might be able to be repurposed to sort of help the community, you know, fight with the virus. I was curious if maybe something like youth and family services could be mobilized in some way or given some extra money to help families that are struggling because they've lost employment or business income.
Right. Youth and Family Services is fully functional. They're utilizing telemedicine techniques. They have a very highly secure, HIPAA secured application that they use, and they're conducting sessions utilizing formats very much like what we're doing here today. So their therapists and staff are fully engaged. There are 2 individuals in the office. Lynn Landry, the director, is there on a daily basis, but they are operating as if you know, business continues to go on. One of the challenges that they faced is some of their clients were unable to have their sessions covered by insurance. But my understanding is that there's some progress in that regard relative to the authorization of telemedicine for Medicare, Medicaid, in this case mostly, reimbursements.
I was also curious if emergency services and police are having a big uptick in calls, or maybe on balance, you know, maybe people aren't driving, maybe they're having less calls or more.
I think, as Mary Jane referred to earlier, there's less ambulance calls, less motor vehicle accidents. But the police department is spending an awful lot of time going around town, making sure folks are complying with the social distancing. One of the phenomena of this time is the number of residents who are calling either into the selectman's office or the police department, and rightfully so, concerned about inappropriate behavior of some of the members of our community.
Has there been a rise in domestic violence?
Not that we've been able to trace at this point, but it's a very well taken point, Veronica. We've had conversations with social services, with youth and family services. The fallout of this from a mental health perspective is going to be immense over time, but that's a good question. But we have not seen any patterns developing at this point. We must be in that honeymoon phase of everybody being together at this point.
I'm kind of surprised excuse me. I'm just surprised because when we had hurricanes, Irene and Sandy and the snowstorm and stuff, there was a big uptick in calls at that time. So I just assumed that there would be now. That's actually good to hear that there doesn't appear to be.
There is an increase statewide, Veronica, but the issue is that the only thing that the courts are hearing are the protective orders, and you can do those straight with an advocate. You don't have to call the police right now. So they streamlined it. The governor signed an executive order, so they can call the domestic violence hotline and just file it right with the advocate. They don't have to go through the police right now. So I don't know if that's impacting it, but I know that there is an increase statewide, and we're seeing some of that through the Women and Family Life Center too.
To just move away from human beings to projects, I was looking at the special funds and the amount of money that is outgoing on Old Quarry and on the water main feasibility study. Is all of that, I don't know whether we need to bring Matt in on this one. Is all of that ongoing? There was a question raised earlier by Jonathan as to whether people were busy at things, but now you see in some cases hundreds of $100,000 or $50,000 being allocated on some of these special projects. So are these workers proceeding as though it's normal times?
Depends on the project, Ken. Many of them are in the design or the engineering phase, and that work is continuing to be done by the respective firms that we've engaged for those projects. In particular, the Sawmill Road Bridge is Hacks Engineering. The one that is actually feet on the street, it would be True Blue Environmental, the water main project in the Mulberry Point, Tuttle's Point area. That is still going full bore. However, you do see some projects that you wouldn't see it reflected here. The Connecticut Water Company has put a halt on all of their projects. The water main project, from what was the water tower out to Route 146 has been put on hold. That should have been started at this point. But there are projects that continue to move forward, Ken.
Okay, thank you.
Ken, seeing that you started on special fund warrants, anything else on warrants? Or expenses or revenues? Last
I have
call.
a question on a warrant.
Go ahead.
I think it appears on the special warrants, or maybe weekly warrants, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was maybe the fifth one down from the top, and it looked like it was a payment to Shipman and Goodwin for $15,000 for OPEB trust. So I was just curious, was that about our new buildup of the trust, or are they trying to create some documentation for it, or?
I've been working with Shipman and Goodwin for over a year now, putting the OPEB trust documents together. They have completed their work and we're kind of ready to move on, but we have a lot of other pressing items at the moment, so it's kind of have that project on hold, unfortunately. And so that billing came in, and I will say that I chose to cover that wholly on the town side. So the Board of Ed did not see an expense for that, since it was something that we've really been putting in place.
What was the $15,000 for? Do you remember?
They spent a lot of time researching with all of our consultants on what we needed to put the documents together, putting the actual documents together, not only the trust documents, but we also have to change our ordinances. So there was a lot of work in place for that.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of administrative research.
Correct. They also sat in with us when we had that meeting with all the parties, Board of Ed and all the departments were involved in OPEB, attended that meeting, and as did Shipman and Goodwin.
Anything else on warrants? Moving to capital. Thank you for our, I guess this is our quarterly update, right, on capital?
Yes, it is.
I know we have a lot of meeting to go, so it does seem like it's cleaned up a lot from what it was several quarters ago. So I know you've been working with Cliff on these.
Yes, and I have if you look on the one for Fund 216 for the school, you'll see on page 1 there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items in like a reddish color.
Yeah.
All of those will be coming to you for closure this year, as I have promised to do so as we move along. So when we are working on our new bonding for August, we will be also closing these projects. I've already worked with Cliff that these are projects that are completed, and we're working on the other funding. Speaking of bonding, I would like to say that the bond market has come back, and we are going to start pursuing the refunding of these bonds once again. I spoke to our financial advisors just today, and we hope to move that forward so that we can still garnish some of those savings that we have been talking about.
Great. Thank you, because I did notice a lot of those balances were pretty low and they look like they were older bonds, so that's great.
We're working on them.
Yep, I know. Take some time.
One question, if the chairman will allow.
Sure, go ahead.
Hopefully short. I recall that the red ones are the projects that are closed. Can you remind me what's blue, gray, and green?
Oh, they really don't have any real meaning other than when these reports were first put together, they gave a different color to every project. So
Okay, good. I was wondering, I wanted to understand the colors. Okay.
I just put the red ones on the front as the ones to remind, as a reminder.
That's for the town fund. That's for the 217. The 216 is just the two colors, the red and the blue, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the town decided to get colorful on you.
Yeah, the colors really don't have any bearing except for those 5 on the school side.
Okay, thank you. And medical?
Medical, as you can see, we can't get much closer to having claims be the amount that we budget on a monthly basis. So we're right on base there. Our claims are still low. We are coming into the time where the town would start to pick up some of the expenses after people have met their HSA deductibles. So we still anticipate, having a couple upticks over the next couple of months, but they are still much lower than we had anticipated. Same as the catastrophic claims. At the moment, we are 43% through our catastrophic claims. We were 70% last year. We did have a big uptick this last month, and we still have a few months to go. But that is trending lower than usual as well. We are still projecting a surplus of about $1.25 million at the end of this year, bringing the estimated fund balance up over $5.3 million.
Okay, and we're just tracking as we typically do, see how the last couple months fare. Anything else for Mary Jane on town expenditures?
Mary Jane, on the medical, when I see that the total claims of 2.6 or so, $7 million, is that an indicator that we probably will get some more coverage from the ISL when I see those kind of claims that high?
You're looking at catastrophic claims?
Yeah.
Sorry. The ISL.
Absolutely. We certainly
Okay.
will, have every month additional catastrophic claims, and as history has shown us, they do grow, quicker as time goes by during the year.
Yep, it usually has worked for us, right, over the years. I'm just kind of a little bit
Absolutely.
curious if it's going to work this year too.
Each year that I've been here, we have more than benefited from catastrophic claims. Our consultants do remind us that once we hit 70%, we have saved money for ourselves. So that's our initial goal.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, if nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of March 2020 in the amount of $1,941,349. Again, I'll go through roll call, same as the Board of Education. Ms.
Mike,
Gamble,
do you want someone to move those motions and second them?
what's that?
Do you want someone to move those motions and second them?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Did I miss to do that on the town?
I think so, but
I might have missed that, yeah.
I think we're with you on these motions. I'll move your motion.
All right, you want to move that, Jonathan? I saw Bob with a second.
Yep.
All right. Now we'll do the roll call. Ms. Scanlon,
Aye.
Ms. Wallace,
Aye.
Mr. Gammerman,
All right,
Mr. Ailes, aye. Mr. Beatty,
Aye.
there he is. Mr. Trotta,
Aye.
Mr. Hartman. Hold on. There you go.
Hey, I can speak.
Hey, I'm sorry. You've been muted this whole time?
Yeah,
All right. Well, now you can do it yourself, so I don't have to do it for you.
thank
Sorry
you.
about that. Okay. Mary Jane, thank you. Item number 6, discuss and take possible action on the fiscal year 2020-21 budget in relation to the current pandemic situation and comments, questions received to date by Guilford residents regarding the fiscal year 2020-21 budget. I do have some prepared comments to keep myself on track. Did indicate to the Board of Finance in a message last night the amount of input we've gotten. I wanted to basically summarize what we've learned and what we've heard. And then ultimately we're going to open it up to particular questions and comments that were raised. So let me just go through a summary. This, for those that are new to this discussion, this is really a continuation right now of the discussions regarding the adoption of the fiscal year 2021 budget and the Board of Finance setting a mill rate. And this is continued ultimately from our discussions on Monday, April 13th, which was a special meeting. That meeting was over a 2-hour meeting. It was an overview of the process, what was proposed in early March to voters, letters and comments from residents, updates from our first selectmen and our Board of Education leaders, all regarding the effects of the pandemic. I realized that those special, I just realized that those special meeting notes from April 13th were shared with this board. I'm wondering if I think what we'll end up doing is we can put that on the agenda at a future agenda to make sure we approve those. I want to make sure that those, especially now timing wise, that those meeting minutes are available to the public. I guess the one thing I should have added, is it possible to add, how would I add special meetings so we can could we just get a draft copy of that for the public? Or I'm thinking of Robert's rules and how it works in the special meeting minutes that were from last week and that we've received, but we didn't approve yet tonight. I don't even know if all of us have seen those meeting notes. This is more of a protocol question as far as approval.
Is that a question for all of us, Mike?
Actually, I'm looking a little bit more towards Tracy and Matt on this one, as far as the special meeting notes from Monday.
What's actually your question, Mike? You don't have the minutes been prepared for and disseminated for your review?
The meeting minutes were prepared and they were sent to the Board of Finance for, I believe it was to the entire board. Was that correct?
Yes, I just didn't put it on the agenda because I wasn't sure I was going to have them done for you to all to review before the meeting, but I was able to. They are posted on the website, but I didn't have it. I wasn't sure if I should put it on the agenda because I wasn't sure they were going to be ready in time.
Okay, I guess my point is, can we put something on there that says draft just so it's available to the public? Because they have not been approved yet, but they can be a draft version that's up. That's all I need to know, and then we'll approve them officially at a future meeting. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And the reason I bring that up is because there was a good amount of dialogue. There were several pages, and also all of the comments that were brought up to that point. So there were 20 comments from the public received by April 13th at our special meeting. And since then, as the Board of Finance knows, and the Board of Selectmen, who also received these, we have received approximately 60 more letters and comments. 30 were received today alone. I don't even know if all of us have had a chance to get them all, because the last sending, I again will give my kudos to Tracy Brinkman, and I know Karen was behind the scenes as well from the first selectman's office trying to put these comments together so we could have them for tonight. I can assure you that everything that was received up to 3 o'clock this afternoon is in our hands. Whether or not we've all had a chance to read every single comment, I guess we'll find out shortly as we talk about this, but it's been an incredible output that we've received, or input from the public that we've received. I did a quick analysis because I think it's important for the public to know what we've been seeing in terms of the general, I guess you could say, flavor of these comments. It's a very simple analysis. I will add that on multiple accounts, these letters had comments that either indicated multiple concerns. So there's some things that might have been counted twice, but I did want to at least share what the messages have been in general, without reading all of them. 22 of the letters or comments received did not want to see a tax increase or budget increase. 53 did not want to see changes in the budget or tax or minimal reductions. Out of those 53, there were 47 that noted the schools specifically and 14 that noted the town. There were 5 that had no opinion whatsoever. They were just specific questions or comments directed towards the Board of Finance. 7 asked about contractual obligations and possible union concessions. 4 addressed process and not allowing voters to vote. And 8 indicated that reductions in the budget would be acceptable, but only if absolutely necessary. I think that gives a pretty, hopefully a summary of what the comments have been and what the residents have been questioning. I did go through all the letters today, and I did that. Hopefully I still have a job. We all kind of joke about that sometimes these things get in our way. But I did read every letter. In fact, there were a couple of people that I did respond to, and I only did it because they had asked questions directly of the Board of Finance. One of them was, what's going on and when will we know there's a budget approved? And I just thought it was appropriate to respond to them directly and tell them, hey, this meeting's going on tonight, please join in if you can. I did go through and look at reviewed those specific questions and concerns. I may not have picked up all of them. I know that the rest of the board has probably looked at most, if not all of them. So I may have missed a few things, but I do want to specifically address some questions and concerns that came up because we should address them, or they at least should be clarified. So just bear with me, because the only way I really did this is just in the way that they were received, in order from the first one that was received after our special meeting all the way to the one that was ultimately shared with all of us at probably about 3:30 or 4 o'clock today. And I'm going to bring up things, and I'm going to ask either our representatives from the town or from the Board of Education to respond as appropriately. So just, again, bear with me, because I do want to try to address as many as I can. There was a comment regarding not being able to support an increase in our budget of 3 to 5% per year. I wanted to address that particular number because there seems to be a lot of confusion on budget versus tax increase. This is something that I did bring up at the special meeting. There are budgets that have been presented to us that ultimately, when you put all the budgets together, they are just over 3%, but the tax increase, because of grand lists and because of revenue factors that are in the budget, we are at a 1.44 proposed tax increase. So there are several comments in here that I may actually be able to hit upon, that it's not necessarily a 3 to 5% tax increase. I want to make sure it's absolutely clear that it is 1.44 that is currently proposed for tax increase. There have been a couple of comments. There was one particular letter that I couldn't help but bring up, that the letter was, let's put it this way, before the special meeting, the letter was very directed towards no tax increase. They rewrote a letter and indicated that after listening to the special meeting, they had some change of thought on this. But I do want to bring up that one of the items they brought up was hiring 2 additional coaches for the teachers. This was something that came up in one of the letters, and then it came up periodically on other letters. And I know we know the importance of the coaches that have been expressed by the Board of Education, but I thought that Dr. Freeman, Dr. Val-Stracy might be able to just indicate the importance of the additional coaches and why those should stay in the budget. And I will unmute Katie, and I will look for Dr. Freeman, who's right there. And I'll make sure you're both unmuted. Okay.
Oh, I'll let you go there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we've talked about the coaches over time. I know that we have been building up this coaching cohort over 10 years. I have said publicly on numerous occasions that I think that the instructional coaches in our school system is simply one of the most impactful investments that we make. An instructional coach could work with 35 different teachers in their classrooms with their real students, developing those instructional strategies and developing that teacher instructionally in real time. I think that we have seen tremendous gains in our instructional practice and in our student performance because of the placement of the instructional coaches. We were particularly excited in this budget because with the placement of these 2 instructional coaches, one at Adams, we complete the instructional coaching positions K through 8. With this placement of a literacy coach at Adams, we would have coaching in both literacy and math instruction in all of our grades K through 8. And with the second placement of the additional coach at the high school this year, again, a literacy coach at Guilford High School, it is the first time that we have placed coaching at Guilford High School. These are professional developers who work with the teachers in real time. And over time, over these past 10 years, I think that we have done well in slowly and thoughtfully growing this cohort of instructional experts. Again, I'll just go back to all the things that we said at the beginning of this meeting. I think this would be the worst possible time to slow down or to hold back on coaching positions. Our teachers are coming back to more unknowns than they have ever faced in their career, in their teaching careers. The idea of having a professional developer, somebody in school who is there to support your instruction, I think it'd be more important this coming year than ever before. So I've seen some of those comments as well. I recognize that it is easy to look at a coach who doesn't carry a caseload of students and think that that's an easy place to make a reduction. But because the coaches carry caseloads of teachers, there's a multiplier effect. A coach who works with 35 teachers is impacting 700 or 800 students' experiences in our schools. And I just want to, I want to point out that we understand that this is a difficult financial time, but we really don't want to make short-term financial decisions that will impact the school experience or that recovery period long-term.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. Moving on, and while you're unmuted, there was a letter that talked about, and we're aware of this. I'm going to probably bring up 2 issues at the same time. One is that the budget that was presented to us is bound, as we know, by teacher salaries, tuition placement, and pensions. And without the preset obligations, there's a net decrease in the other line items. I know one of the questions I think we started broaching at our special meeting is there any opportunity operationally to decrease any of the discretionary areas, which I know there's not many, but the letter, and I want you to confirm it and indicate if there's any further savings regarding the net decrease in other line items other than those that we're bound to. Secondarily, while I'm reading it and looking at it, does this budget, and how does the budget affect the, or does it relate to the enrollment and the fact that we've had a declining enrollment?
Yes, so the budget that sits in front of you currently, remember, is responsive to declining enrollment. It includes a gross reduction of 10 teaching positions that are in response to declining enrollment, primarily at the elementary levels and at Adams Middle School. The net reduction is approximately 6 teaching positions. The 2 coaching positions that I just talked about are in fact not new monies. They are offset by the reduction of, again, 10 teaching positions initially that we reduced down to about 6 reductions in the budget as it stands in front of you. We're offsetting those 10 reductions with the 2 coaching positions we discussed, with a computer coding position at Adams, and with some various FTEs. So yeah, this budget is very responsive to the declining enrollment that has been creeping up on us over the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to shift gears. In a later letter that we received last week, Matt, Mary Jane, this is more for you. And it's questioning a couple of items that I kind of alluded to before. One about the snow plowing budget and what happens to that if it doesn't get spent. There was also something about the golf course, which every year we seem to deal with the golf course question on expenditures. But the question was, why not let the golf course just let the grass grow and take the snow plowing and move it into next year's budget? And I just wanted to know if you wanted to respond to that.
First off, I'll take the golf course one. And that is that the Board of Selectmen, after a rather comprehensive review of golf course operations over the past year, including the commission coming up with a plan to improve revenue productivity and cost reduction, was determined that it was a viable and very strong asset to the community. And we were going to continue to operate it as a golf course. We have employees, 1 full-time employee who remains on the payroll. The anticipation is that that course will open up again at some point. As you're aware, you may or may not be aware, golf courses throughout the state are currently open. The Golf Course Commission, when they meet, I believe it is next week or maybe the week after, will be reviewing their recommendation in terms of reopening the course. They had made the recommendation that we close it. So in terms of the snowplow question, the question was, would we move those monies forward? Is that?
If there was very little of it used this year, the money earmarked for that could be rolled into next year's budget.
One of the things that we have done, based on the fact that some of the suppliers, well, there was an issue with one of the suppliers of the salt and sand products, someone losing the space for them to store their materials. So this decision was made back towards the end of February. We reordered salt and sand materials because we had capacity to store it, and we got it at substantially reduced pricing. So we've already moved some of the anticipated surplus in terms of the snow plowing budget into the materials budget for next year. So there potentially will be some savings there next year.
Great, thank you. There were numerous comments, and I just wanted to address this one fairly quickly because it'll probably come up again, regarding the possible use as a revenue line item of our unassigned fund balance. I know that we have mentioned this a few different times, special meeting, even throughout the year in our meetings, not so much use of it, but lately there's been some discussion, and there were letters that indicated why not use the unassigned fund balance. Right now, I think the only thing that I could say, and I can't speak for the Board of Finance, but everything is on the table this year. Obviously, it's something that we can certainly consider. We are considering it. There are dangers to using it, and there's possible pros and cons to both. And I would just indicate that we are looking at every single avenue right now. So to to say use it or don't use it, I think that's something that we will have further discussion about and what those pros and cons are rather than belaboring that issue right now. We'll have plenty of discussion about that. I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that, but I wanted to make sure it was addressed.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's any secret that I, among others, have expressed concern about using unassigned or unallocated fund balance to budget operating budgets, owing to the very precarious position it puts you in the following year, that in order to find that same revenue source, you need to either go back to your unassigned account or you need to raise taxes, or hopefully you have significant grand list growth. So you put yourself in a hole for the following year's revenue budget. I'm also going to suggest that if anyone was on that call today that I had shared with everyone relative to the impact of state financing, I think you heard a message loud and clear. The fiscal year 21 budget is not the concern. It is the fiscal 22 budget that will in fact be a concern. Because the state has already indicated but the state already has the biennial budget in place. And the federal aid and relief will more than likely cover the fiscal year 20 and 21 budgets. So any pressure we're going to see from the state is most likely going to come in the 2022 budget. One of the other things is we don't know what this is going to do. In terms of what's the impact going to be on local revenues as we collect local taxes over the next couple of years. So to go to fund balance at this point, I think is completely preliminary. But I also think you need to do so with significant caution that next spring, you may be putting together a budget that has some challenges related to it in terms of revenue. And that's when you may need to consider using that unallocated fund balance. I'll get off the soapbox now.
Thank you, Matt. And we will have, I'm sure, more discussion about that. Moving on, there was a letter that indicated the Board of Ed or Education members approved a proposed budget in February and have not asked for any increase. This is more of a correction. I want to make sure that it is clear that there was actually an increase. It was slightly under 2 at 1.94%. But that was more of a clarification that I wanted to make on that for that particular resident. There was one resident that indicated a few items, and Matt, I think I'm probably going to go to you on this one for a couple of these. Where there is not a belief that there should be an increase. Purchase of new vehicles and the need for any new equipment. I think one of the things we talk about every year is whenever there is any kind of reduction, the first place that either the Board of Education goes or the Board of Selectmen goes is usually in capital. That was one of the items that was called out, as well as the pensions being fully funded, and that virtually that's not the case in any other professions or jobs, as well as employees needing to contribute it to their health insurance premiums. And many contracts need to be renegotiated, vehicle maintenance, legal fees, and other contracts, which will lead into another question later. But it's my understanding that obviously capital is one thing that would be looked at. I'm not, when I say we, it's Board of Selectmen and or the Board of Education, but also on the pensions and health insurance. And I thought maybe you'd be able to shed some light on how the pension and health insurance have been negotiated over the last couple of years.
Pension is no longer a negotiated contract item. All of our employees are currently on defined contribution plans. And in terms of the contention that the pension fund is 100% funded is simply erroneous. You all received a couple of months ago our annual audit. And I think you may recall that they're all healthily funded, thanks to some of the work done by Mr. Hartman, in fact, on the pension committee in the mid to 80% range, which for municipal pension plans is very strong. It's one of the reasons why we get the rating we do year after year from the rating agencies when we go to the bond market. And my personal belief is it's a fool's errand to go and start playing games with pension funding. You can take a look at what happened to the state of Connecticut and see a primary example of what neglecting to fund your pensions properly will do for you. What was the question related to health, Mike?
That employees should be contributing to their health insurance premiums. And I know that those health insurance premiums over time have been negotiated as part of the contracts to a much more advantageous position than we've had. So
right, a couple of things. Tracy, if you would get a chance to unmute Mitch, because I want him to chime in here at some point. All of our employees contribute to their health care. Typically, that is in the 18 to 20% range. We have implemented HSAs here on the town side, as well as the Board of Education side, which gives those employees a much greater role in managing their health care. Mitch, you want to expound, please?
Matt, I think you said most of it already, but yes, our employees do contribute between 18 and 20% of the premium share. They have, and that's one of the higher amounts you see in municipalities, but they have very good health benefits as a result. But we've also moved all but one group, and we're still in negotiations with that last group, into the health savings accounts, which has been a tremendous savings, as Mary Jane has been indicating when she went through the medical report. And I have to agree with the first selectman about the pension funding as well. The 100% number may have been misconstrued because we are funding 100% of what our actuaries are recommending, which is very, very important. And for anybody who looks around the state and hears the problems that other municipalities are having and other states are having, we're not having that here because of, you know, the finance board, the board of selectmen, and our entire group here being very diligent about making sure that the fund is done properly. So we don't have to go out for pension obligation bonds like other towns have had to do. So you should be commended for that and continue to do that. And Mary Jane has her hand raised.
Jane, go ahead.
I just wanted to note that, you know, the pension and the medical line items are two of our largest expenditures. And those line items in the 21 budget are only going up 1.27%. The pension committee did a tremendous amount of work this last year to change our assumptions to smooth out the pension required contributions. And obviously we've done a lot of work with the Board of Ed and the town side on the HSAs for the medical. So considering the extent of those two line items, a 1.27% increase is much lower than we had originally anticipated for the coming year.
Thank you. Bear with me for a second because we had a little bit of noise that we took care of. Okay. There was a letter that indicated, and this was more of, I guess, a question, I think it was directed towards me, and then I shared it with everybody as has been the protocol, about the requested cuts of $500,000 and $1 million appear to be very rounded numbers. And I guess the question was, how did those numbers come about? I want to make it clear that when I did, or when we all discussed at the special meeting, and I brought up at the during the discussion last week about those numbers, it was simply indicating comparisons of what would need to be attained to get to no tax increase impact to both of the boards. There was no rhyme or reason for that, those numbers, except to simply indicate comparison numbers to get to what some of the residents in the town were requesting. So I guess what I'll address beyond that is that there has been also several comments about that we are proposing any kind of cut, whether it's $1 million or $500,000 or whatever the cut is. I think it's clear that having been on these calls, we all understand that there is no proposed cut as of right now. There are certainly residents that have indicated where they, what they would like, but I only had indicated what the comparison numbers were to get there. No one on this board that I know of has gone out and indicated what their proposed number is. That is something that will be discussed. So I want to make sure that was clear that the Board of Finance has not put any numbers out there except for just for comparison purposes. There was also a comment regarding a proposed 4.91% budget increase not being prudent. I do want to indicate that that 4.91% budget increase number is simply what the town and debt service is, and as we know on this board, the debt service is a big driver of that this year, and the last big driver because of the high school project. But I again want to reiterate that 4.91% is not the budget increase, nor is it the tax increase. That is simply a portion of it. Once you put the Board of Education in there, and as I said before, the grand list and other revenues, it is a 1.44% tax increase. And again, this goes to the point of using budget versus tax increases. So I want to make sure that that was clear for this particular president. I already mentioned this one. This was about what our numbers were proposing, which we haven't proposed anything. There was a comment about the salary budgets and considering not giving cost of living increases. This was really kind of directed towards the Board of Education, but what I want to do is I do want to open up an issue that has come up several times regarding the current union contracts. I know this is a very, very, very dangerous area to go into, but I want to make it clear that I've talked to our first selectman, I talked to our superintendent about addressing this issue, and I will tell you that a couple of us, Ken Gammerman being one, myself, I think Veronica, you had some experience with this on the Board of Selectmen of opening up contracts before and what that can lead to. It is not something that anybody wants to do. It hurts you in the end. I know that when we did this in the Great Recession, that in 2009, we opened up those contracts. I will simply state that I've heard it numerous times that many teachers never got back to where they should have been. They took flat funding, flat salaries that year, and they were the only district that did it. And it was, for lack of a better way of saying this, Guilford was scorned for many years because of that. And we had to live with that decision. I know that Matt and Dr. Freeman, you probably want to say something about this, but there were numerous comments about it, and I think it's only appropriate that we address it because it is not a place that we definitely not a place we want to go into.
Mike, I'll take it first.
You go ahead first, and then Dr. Freeman.
Mike, yeah, thank you, Mike. It is a very dangerous place. While we have not had a discussion at the Board of Selectmen, I'm fairly certain that that is not a place they want to go to, nor would we go to, unless the Board of Finance suggested that they were going to make cuts in the order that represented our anticipated salary increases. I have a hard time going to our unions, particularly our police and fire unions, who are putting their lives on the line every day because they are essential employees, emergency responders, and asking them to do something along those lines. So I have not, yes, I thought that this discussion would come up, but I have not given serious consideration to going to the unions, 5 of which we are currently in the middle of negotiations on. And we've already started down the path with, exchanging proposals with those respective unions. And at this point, we have not entertained asking them to consider a freeze. If the Board of Finance feels that that's where they need to go to, of course, we will go and do exactly that.
Yeah, I'm happy to build on that. I would agree with what you have both just said. To the selectman's point, we've just concluded negotiations with 5 out of our 6 bargaining groups. To ask to reopen those contracts after having just put them to bed, I think would be challenging. And Mr. Chairman, to the history, you're exactly right. The Guilford Teachers Association gave back a negotiated raise 3 contracts ago, and essentially have never made that ground back. The 3 successor contracts have not been particularly generous or rich in salary increases on the heels of that. To ask that group to once again step up and forego a negotiated raise, when last time there was no other teacher group in the state that followed on the heels of that, I would find difficult to bring to them. And additionally, and I'll apologize for this, and I know that you do have a mute function that you don't have on me in regular meetings, but back to what we've said already at the beginning of this meeting, the teachers in Guilford, the teachers particularly, the teachers make up over 50% of our employees in this district. The teachers are working harder and more creatively than they've ever been asked to work before. There are lots of heroes that are coming forward in this crisis, but I wouldn't hesitate to place teachers and Guilford teachers in specifics among those lists of heroes. Kids are experiencing something that not any one of us on this phone call ever experienced. They're living through an impact to their education, and they're living through a social and emotional situation that we never addressed as children. And our teachers are on the front line helping them get through that every single day. They're going to come back to a school year next year facing unprecedented challenges. We've never asked a team of educators to respond to what we're going to ask of them next year, and to reward them with that by asking them to take a pay freeze, I would find really difficult. And again, I say that with the utmost respect for other people who are actually fully unemployed at this time. But I want to be careful that we don't fall into a trap of addressing one problem by creating a second and possibly greater problem. I just have to advocate for our employees and our teachers and say that I don't think the solution to this problem is pay freezes going forward into next year.
And if I may, I would just like to echo that. I don't need to expound. Dr. Freeman expressed it very thoroughly and very well. But I think this is a group that is going to need our support very significantly moving forward, particularly if we, and I think many of us expect we may not be in school before September. They need our support. They don't need to be asked to have their salary frozen.
Thank you all.
Mike, it's all right. Maybe I could go next.
Well, I'll tell you what. I have concluded the questions that I had in looking at all the letters. Now, again, there were 60 of them. I may have missed a few, but I wanted to make sure that any resounding themes that were coming up in the letters were addressed. And so I certainly may have, missed some things. Jonathan, I was going to open up to the Board of Finance members to see if there was anything I did miss or any other questions that the public had or that you had while we've got everybody on the call and we're in this line item.
Mike, if I may, if I could just, and I apologize if I'm stepping out of line.
Go ahead.
You highlighted the themes among questions from the letters, but you did say that there were also themes of support that came through the letters that you didn't take time to highlight because they weren't written as questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I can reiterate those numbers that I had. Again, out of the 80 letters, ultimately by email that we had now, and remembering that these came through both, numerous sources, but mostly through the town email that was created for this purpose to share comments. I know Board of Finance members, a lot of us got them all together with some people copied in. Some of us got them individually. I know I ended up getting quite a few individually, and I took every single one of them and shared them. The resounding, the result of these were, and again, there were 22 that 1/3 of them did not want to see a tax increase or a budget increase. And 2/3 of them were basically did not want to see changes in the budget or tax or minimal reductions whatsoever, or no opinion, that they were simply asking specific questions. Out of those, there were other things that came out of it. And that's when I mentioned about the unions, when I mentioned about the voters being allowed to vote or not, the reductions in the budget, whether they'd be acceptable and what is, if it's necessary. But for the most part, 2/3 were either no comment, asking questions, or in favor of not doing anything and leaving it as is and keeping everything intact, or 1/3 were reductions. That was pretty much the breakdown.
I appreciate that reiteration.
And the reason I didn't go through all of them, either, as we all know, when we got these letters, and they're going to be public record, they're going to be part of our meeting minutes. They were all pretty much the same in the way they were couched. I will say, and I didn't bring it up, I had it actually circled, but I think Dr. Freeman, Dr. Bal-Stracy, even Linda, you all had, actually Moira during her report, all made comments about the challenges that are going to be happening next year. What is it going to look like when the students go back to school? And to do anything to cut the education budget, because that was the majority of the comments that came out were about the education budget, would not be a prudent thing to do, especially in these times. If anything, more money might be needed. And you had mentioned that. I don't think many people said more money, but most of them said, do not, whatever you do, touch the education budget. That being said, though, there were numerous people also on the town side, not as many as the Board of Ed, but on the town side that said, you know, youth and family services, human services. There were numerous items that were raised to keep the town budget intact. So, you know, I've thought about this, and I think that, you know, we have a very difficult and challenging position to be in, and we all know that. And in comments, it's no different than any other year. We take comments into consideration, whether it's 2 members of the public or it's 20. And in this case, 80 members of the public have gone out of their way to make comments. To me, that's more engaging than we've had in previous years. You know, notwithstanding a budget referendum, we understand that, but you know, we've been mandated and required to have a job as leaders of this town, and it's not something any of us are taking lightly. And we're hoping that, you know, with a really good consensus and good collaboration here, we're going to come to a decision that's going to be not going to make everybody happy. We all know that. I could say that to every member of the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen and everybody. We're not going to make everybody happy, whatever the decision is. But the decision that we have is got to be a value-based decision that affects most of the people in town, and takes that into account. And the 80 letters certainly do help, and it helps in our consideration. So I didn't want to read all 80, but to give an idea of what the flavor of them are, and what the concerns are. And I may have missed a couple of items, but with that, that's why I wanted to open up the Board of Finance. Dr. Freeman, I hope that responds to, you know, why I kind of went through this the way I did with the letters.
I appreciate that reiteration. Thanks very much.
Okay. Board of Finance members, opening up.
I'll start. It was a well-coordinated campaign of letter writing. I admit it was extraordinarily well done. The concepts that came through, I've got to tell you, I'm a little unsettled though. I'm a little uncomfortable because it was kind of, you know, us over them. Now there will be other departments in town, health and services, the food bank. I was on with food bank today to ask them for some statistics. We're still collecting data. And we all know that our revenues will be down. And I'm concerned that, you know, there are a number of taxpayers out there who are really struggling. Go to the banks, ask the banks what's actually going on. You know, we would be the only financial counterparty in people's lives that isn't running at them with money. My car insurance company is offering me a discount. I didn't ask them. So while I understand the passion of the plea, And I understand, I fully appreciate the nature of the job and the work. And I take on board everything Dr. Freeman says and Mrs. Balistraci, Dr. Balistraci. I think we've got to be careful here. We've got a lot to measure up. And if another campaign breaks out in the other direction next week, what do we do? Saying that, here's the math. That's the social engineering. The math was, if you had a $400,000 house, your property tax bill is going to go up $10 a month. It's not, you know, that's not a lot of money. But people are really hurting, and I think we've got to be cognizant. So I've asked for some data. I'm still working on some numbers, and I look forward to hearing more.
Are there any other questions or comments? Just so you know, what my next step is going to be is really kind of indicate what our options are moving forward. And probably I'm going to recommend, based on especially what happened later today with the amount of comments, I'm going to recommend probably an extension to all of you. I'm just giving you a heads up that I think we need to bring in further comment from folks that some missed the deadline at 3 o'clock, and I can assure you that their comments will be shared. But I think what we need to do is make sure that everybody is heard and extend the, I think making a decision tonight with everything that's been going on with the last minute comments, preparing for this regular meeting, I think has been a lot on us. I think we still have a lot to weigh. I don't know how the rest of you feel on the board, but I know I want to have some of this sink in a little bit more and think about it. And continue to get comments from everyone. So I just want to let you know where I'm looking 10 minutes down the road, so you know where I'm going, and set up some scenarios of what the options are and then the time frame. But if anybody else has anything that's a comment,
Mike, I got a few things I'd like to express.
I didn't bring up. Now's the time.
You figured that.
No, go ahead. I heard you. Gotcha.
All right. So if it's all right, I think my comments are going to spur a lot of other comments. But I want to bring out like 3 points, and I just appreciate if you just kind of listen to 3 points. So I think the first point for me comes to the procedure, this process. And when it first started, I like you was kind of excited. I was like, wow, we're finally getting some emails and some feedback, some public forum, something that's been sort of missing from our everyday meetings. And I think it's fitting under these unusual, unprecedented circumstances. And, at first I even pressured you. I said, why don't we get each of these opinions read? And I've actually come to realize now, watching these emails pour in, that, we are just not equipped for this kind of process. I mean, the real say of the voters is the referendum. And, we really can't speak their opinions in a 2-hour meeting when we have, 60 emails pour in. And I just feel very strongly that this process is just not fair to voters, and that they should have the final say on the budget. And these executive orders, I understand. I mean, they are the order of the governor. But I feel like there's some latitude in these orders if we look for it. I mean, we're seeing 2 towns now that are, rescheduling and planning to hold referendums, and even a public vote in Vernon, which I have shared with the community and members of the board. And I just feel like having this board vote in place of this, referendum or final say by the voters, it's just not right, and it should be a last resort, if we have any kind of latitude. And I know Matt will have some comments on this, and I give him a lot of credit because he's in the hot seat. He's got to decide whether we have this latitude or not, because the governor's orders have to be followed. But I look to him to really search if maybe there's a better way to approve the budget. And I just feel much more comfortable if the voters had the final say on the budget. So I wanted to speak to process, and maybe even ask Matt if the governor answers my letter, or some latitude comes up and his hands are tied, if we could possibly reschedule the referendum. So the other point I wanted to make is that I feel like we're in this like privileged class of some kind. I mean, here I am as blessed as the next person I I work for an events contractor. You know, I try to work very hard, but I'm very blessed that they have these facilities to let me work at home and that I'm considered to be an essential worker. And, you know, I'm looking at this contrast with municipal workers. I mean, they're protected by the executive order of the governor. And, you know, I'm not saying that they're not, you know, fantastic, hardworking people as well, but, you know, questions come to my mind, you know, is every single government or municipal state worker essential or non-essential? I don't know those answers, but it bothers me that there's this huge disparity. You know, I'm sitting in my house now. I have a full fridge. I have a paycheck, and I feel very blessed. While I admit these are nationally, I can't tell how they overlay on Guilford, but, you know, 22 million people unemployed, you know, worried about how to pay a mortgage, you know, worried about how, you know, what they're going to do with their kids. Their kids are home with them. And I feel like we need to like think about them right now. And the other big piece, the other third point is that, you know, I've looked to this board many times and said that, you know, maybe we should be cutting the budget. Maybe it's not adding value to the town. And I haven't gotten agreement, and, you know, a referendum has come and the voters have said, hey, you know, we do think it's worth the spending, and they have approved these increases. So be it. But I am astonished at this very moment in our history. And I think to myself, you know, what level of economic calamity would convince this board that maybe, you know, salaried employees could give up just their increases? Or, you know, maybe we don't have to have new carpet this year, or an extra 400 feet of sidewalk. So, you know, I really do think that these taxpayers need relief. You know, not all of them. You know, God bless some of this technology and some of the businesses that are surviving through this period. But there's just so many small business owners that they're struggling. I mean, they don't know if their doors are going to open. They don't know if they're going to be able to pay the mortgage. They don't know if the paycheck program is going to give them enough money to cover overhead and get through this. And I just think that they need some relief. And I'll just leave you off with a little just anecdotal thing. One of my neighbors, I was talking to him about this, and he was sort of screaming at me. And I thought, hey, he's probably screaming at me because I'm 6 feet away. But I think he was screaming at me because he kept saying, you know, do they realize that we haven't had income for a month? No income. And I just think we need to put ourselves in their shoes and think about where we could make the budget more streamlined and where we could save taxpayers some money. All right, thank you. I was on my soapbox for quite a while. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm sure that, yeah, we'll probably have a couple of comments. I mean, one of the things that
the only comment I don't welcome is that this is genuine. Trust me, this is not disingenuous. This is genuine.
I wasn't going to say that.
All right.
I wasn't going to say that. What I was going to say is that a lot of the things that you just said, I want to make sure it's clear that I don't think there's any of us that don't feel fortunate of where we are, and also don't feel disheartened by what is going on around, not just in our community, but around the world. It is a very tough decision to make when you are affecting people and their pocketbooks. We also have had a ton of input on what happens if we do any drastic measures. When the drastic measures are more about what it's not so much in what I wrote down was, it's not so much about the sidewalks and the Capitol, and it's about the behind the scenes work that is going on. I'm going to be, you know, I'm right there with you. All right. I'm a principal of an architecture firm. Am I essential? I don't think so. Maybe I'm just, you know, I'm being humble. But we're considered essential because we're supporting construction projects across the state. So everybody who thinks, you know, what their description of essential is versus non-essential, I mean, I hate to think that anybody's non-essential. I mean, restaurants, in my case, in my opinion, are very essential right now. I miss restaurants. I miss going out. I miss going to the theater. I miss a lot of things. And yes, people are suffering. I think in a lot of ways that, and I will be honest about this as well, that Guilford is in a way shielded on some of those things. All right, we're not in an urban area where there's a lot of people working in retail. I'm not saying that there aren't, but I am certainly saying that there are certain expectations. There are certain reasons why people have moved to Guilford. And we have to weigh that. And if we start taking away things from the budgets at a clip of making a 0% tax increase hypothetically, and cutting out, over $1 million worth of funding to budgets, to allow people to, as I believe Mr. Hartman had mentioned, for somebody who has a $400,000 house, it's going to be $10 more in a month in their tax payment. Yeah, that could be a lot. And I'm not saying that, hey, to some people $10 is a lot, some people it's not. But the point is, do you cut a budget to allow certain things to happen at what is really, at the end of the day, it's not an incredibly huge impact for some of our residents. And in that case, I would say for most of our residents. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be cognizant of those people that are struggling right now. And I agree that I think something should be done. But I am not in favor of opening contracts and making it very difficult for those that are on the front lines, that are doing essential businesses 10 times more than I'm doing. And I
Mike, if you would do that in the midst of this crisis, what would be enough to consider that?
What would be enough? Well, I don't know. That's something that we're going to have to weigh. I think right now, we're talking about municipal government and schools. We're talking about schools that are teaching our children. We're talking about government that helps us function, that helps us have a life that we expect in Guilford. And we start going and cutting that. I'm not saying a pandemic doesn't affect it, but I'm not saying you pull everything out of it because, well, there's a pandemic, which this could create a huge recession. It could be years. We don't know. It could also be very quick. We've never been through anything like this. And you can't collude 1918 because it was a different time. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying we have a very, very difficult balancing act to try to decide upon. And a pandemic certainly should affect it, and it should be considered, but it shouldn't completely decimate our government and our schools.
Well, I'm certainly not asking for a $0 budget. So I'm
not saying that you did. I'm saying that is what some want, and I'm addressing that. I'm agreeing with what you are saying in terms of we need to consider it, and there are people that are hurting, and that I feel very fortunate as well. And that's all going to be weighed in.
Mike, we certainly feel lucky here too. We're spending all of our time dealing with the public, and we're filling in loan applications, helping people apply for unemployment and get their loans, get the stimulus checks and all the rest. So we kind of see it at the grassroots level. We know, we just know that people are hurting. I'm not after, my point is, and about the $10 or $12 a month, I mean, I think it was a marvelous budget. I think it was an astounding budget, and I think it was well crafted, and it's a shame this has happened to us, but it hasn't happened just to us. It's happened to everybody. And I think we've got to show that we're cognizant of it. And we have, my big thing is data. We need to measure. And I think we just have some more work to do. More information to take in, that's all.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
And I don't want to be tone deaf. I mean, we've got to let people know that we're looking under every rock. And one of the letters asked if any of the, they didn't ask if we were after the unions. They asked if any of them had volunteered any concessions. And it's a fair question. And the answer is no, evidently. So, we have to tell people that we're looking.
If we're out of power.
We just have to let people know that we're cognizant of what they're going through, and that we're looking everywhere we can.
Hold on, Ken, did you want to say something?
I did, but I've got 5% of my battery remaining. So I should move to it. I think the one thing we can say, and I hope I still have some juice over here. on the battery, not on the board. And that is that everything in those 60 some odd letters all showed a love of the town, a respect for the process, and a feeling that although they differed on things, they still believed that we could come up with something that they could live with. And I think that this attitude toward the town is wonderful, and I think that it puts a responsibility on us to really deliberate. Maybe the hour is getting too late tonight. We should deliberate as soon as we can. But I think it would be marvelous if we could come forward and consider some of the opportunities and some of the options that we have. I think that we should consider putting things on the table that I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, I'm glad you can.
We're listening, Ken.
Okay. I did have a couple of questions to ask of Jonathan, but before I get to that, I did read the letters very carefully, went over them carefully. Happen to be old enough to have lived through the crises that we've had in past budget years, the cutting out of band programs, the give backs out of the generosity of the teachers, which I think is wonderful. I do agree that the teachers did not bear the brunt of this, and I would hope that we can keep them free of that. I don't want to go into any areas to consider other than, and nothing is purely discretionary, because there have been some things in this budget, in these budgets, that have appeared for a number of years, and they've been deferred. So anything that can be considered should be back on the table. But I do think that we need to walk away from this at this point tonight and consider perhaps another meeting, maybe in as shortly as a week from now, where we can take up the issues before us and move on that. I do think that we should not leave things like I mean, everything has a cost, but I think that the undesignated balance ought to be looked at. I think that the budgets of the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen ought to be looked at, because I think there is, if we decide to do nothing but resubmit the budget out as it is, I can live with that as well. But at least we should consider where opportunities are, because I think there's been a generosity of spirit on the part of the people in this town that's manifested itself, not only in these letters, but in the meetings that we've had over the last 20, 30 years. And it's a wonderful town. Nobody wants to destroy that spirit. I do have one question to ask of, I guess it would be of Jonathan. When I heard about drive-through voting and other alternatives to the governor's executive order, it kind of confused me. I thought the executive order was unflappable and unassailable. Are we now saying that any town can go ahead and use that as an advisory dictum and then go ahead about its own business of deciding for itself? What does that do to the shared sacrifice that the legislature up in Hartford and led by the governor has imposed on us? And I'll close
Mike,
with that.
Mike, I'll be happy.
And that's a tough question.
No, it's not. No, it's not a tough question, Jonathan. It is settled. The governor's executive order says shall. The Vernon situation that you are referring to is an anomaly. They did a town meeting drive-through, not a budget meeting, not a town budget meeting. And by the way, they don't have a referendum vote on their budget. So they are distinctly different than the town of Guilford. The governor's order
that North Branford's
form of
rescheduled
government
their
where
meeting
a
as well.
referendum, where a
Their
referendum was
is
needed to be held.
scheduled for May 12th.
Pardon me?
North Branford has rescheduled their referendum.
And is that, Jonathan, let me ask you a question. Is that a binding or a non-binding referendum?
I don't know the answer.
I would take a look and find out, because it's a non-binding referendum. Their budget is set by the council.
Well, I know this issue goes back and forth, but there's research that's been shared with me with a state representative that says that you do have the latitude to do this. I leave it to the attorneys. I leave it to the governor to answer my letter and just clarify. But if your hands weren't tied, would you consider a referendum so that Guilford can vote and have the final word on the budget?
Let me ask you a question, Jonathan. Would you recommend a town meeting where we had people come together and then subject our senior citizens to coming in for voting in polling places?
Absolutely not. I mean, the language in 7S7 says that you're supposed to consult with local and state health officials and that you're supposed to conduct it in a way that reduces the transmission of COVID-19. I mean, that's just a given. I mean, obviously safety is first. But I'm saying if we have this latitude and it's allowed and it can be done safely, why not let Guilford vote?
I think it's because we don't have that latitude, Jonathan.
Yeah.
This is Jeff
Thank you,
speaking.
Jeff.
We don't have that latitude.
I don't think we do.
We don't.
We have legal opinion, in-house counsel, our town council, the advice of attorneys in Hartford, the advice of our labor attorneys firm, all suggest that we have to do the course of action that we're doing. And by the way, Jonathan, the Board of Selectmen this morning, with a 5-0 vote, changed the language on the motion that we made the last time from we recommend to the Board of Finance establish a budget by May 5th to we are requiring you to establish a budget by May 5th, with the caveat that if there's information that comes to the forefront that perhaps would merit a change to that, we would, at the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 4th of May, extend that out to the 21st of May, which is the allowed date, the 30 days we're allowed to move it by the earlier executive order. That would be the last date at which it would be possible for you guys to set the budget.
Yep, I was in attendance and, I appreciate that guidance from the Board of Selectmen. And, Matt, I know that the executive order, may be interpreted that way, but I'm hoping for the latitude, and that's why I respectfully submitted my letter to the governor to clarify.
Attorney Barrett, did you want to, you had indicated you wanted to say something?
Well, I did take a look at, Matt had sent along, Jonathan had sent along your email to me, so I did want to take a look at that. Vernon did in fact have a vote by drive-in, but it was for a special appropriation. And so that actually would be covered by what you had talked about before, the 7S order. And under that, the vote on that type of thing was not mandatory that would be suspended. Unlike budget. The budget process, the executive order is clear that it's going to suspend referendums. For the special appropriation, for bonding, for bond anticipation notes, those still can go to a town meeting and referendum. That 7S says that if the selectmen choose, they could suspend those, but they don't have to. And that's why Vernon, in that case, they had already had it scheduled. They felt they had no reason to change it. So that actually did not conflict with any of the orders, any of the executive orders of the governor. With respect to North Branford, and Matt sort of alluded to this already, they just have a different form of government. They have a town council, IL, and they have a town manager. They don't really have a board of finance, so there wouldn't be the board of selectmen in our town had to refer it over to the board of finance. They didn't really have to do that in North Branford. Now, what they're actually going to do for their budget, according to their website, they still have a referendum scheduled on May 19th. I don't know what they're going to do with that. Maybe it's challenging to show that we. I don't know what that was, but so you know, maybe they feel that they are opted out because of the way the executive order applies to their particular form of government. But for us, it's crystal clear, I think, that we are bound by it. And the only way to ignore that is literally to ignore it and say we're not going to abide by it. So our counsel on this, and it's a very interesting situation we're all in, Jonathan, everyone, frankly, but is to follow the executive orders, and in our view, they're quite clear.
Well, I've talked to a state legislature, and his initial reaction was that he did think that the latitude was there, but now that he's reading the language, he's trying to get an answer directly from the governor for me.
I think if there's going to be any relief, it would have to come from the governor.
Agreed. The governor's order needs to be followed.
Thank you.
There's no question there. I'm only asking for latitude or clarity.
Mr. Chairman, indulge me for a moment. I think I share the same level of empathy I've heard from all of my colleagues here relative to the folks in our community that are suffering. Earlier this morning, the Board of Selectmen enacted one of the two relief programs made available to us by one of the executive orders, and that was a 90-day deferral on taxes for the entire community. The order, for those who are paying attention, gave the individual municipalities the opportunity to require that someone file an affidavit indicating the nature and the severity of the impact that this has had on their ability to pay their taxes. We have decided to dispense with that requirement. So it is a blanket deferral that is being offered to our taxpayers for 90 days from July 1st. So with the expectation and hope that all of our lives return to some level of normalcy, this should provide those among us who are suffering the most to have a measure of relief and an opportunity to recover. At the same time, I'm going to exhort our community, because I know the spirit of our community is such that those who are not impacted by this virus should pay their taxes on July 1 as they're due, or no later than July 31st or August 1st, which is when the penalty phase kicks in. So I just thought you folks should be aware that, yes, we are cognizant of the impacts, and we have taken steps, and we took a more definitive step than was allowed in the executive order on the deferment. Secondly, we also made the decision, I made the decision to grandfather every senior citizen participant in the senior tax freeze program. That is not dependent on them filing another application to see if they still qualify. It is a blanket one-year grandfathering of all participants in the senior tax freeze program. So we have taken some measures, small as they might be, to help mitigate some of the impact of the COVID-19 virus. Thank you for indulging us.
Thank you, Matt. Okay. We are still on our agenda item. We still have a couple of things to cover. I just want to ask the board if there is anything else that should be brought up, because what I want to do is set the stage, which I believe is where we stand in terms of our options. I think I've eliminated one based on what I've heard tonight, I hope. And then what I would recommend for a timeline. I do not believe I need to, I don't believe I have to have a motion to extend the public comment, or I think we have to, do we have to have a motion to schedule a special meeting? I believe we have to do that, right? Do we have to do that, or can we just set it?
You can call it.
You can call it, right?
I'll move that motion if you need to.
All right. So here's where we stand, and I'll recap, and then we'll get on with our meeting. And actually, we still have public forum in case anybody wants to speak in public forum. So Tracy, don't go anywhere. So we have a couple of options that we need to consider. There are two spectrums of this, which I think that we're all pretty well aware of. There is the spectrum of not doing anything. The budgets stay intact, no different than where it was on March 5th. We make no revenue adjustments, and we go ahead and approve the budget, both budgets as recommended to the voters, and that would incur a 1.44% tax increase, and that would be where we would set the mill rate. I don't have the exact number, but trust me when I tell you the mill rate would be set at 32.49. All right. Now that's assuming we make no changes. The other end of the spectrum is one that we broached tonight that I think that the public is nervous about, that I don't think I see or have heard anything that is likely to come to this, but that would be to reduce the budgets by a combined $1.4 million to get to this 0% tax increase. That would, and as I mentioned before, this is where the numbers come in. That would likely be a $950,000 reduction to the Board of Ed budget and a $475,000 to the Board of Selectmen, hypothetically. I don't see or hear anything that should get the public nervous that we were going to go that drastic. I could be wrong, but right now that's the two ends of the spectrum that we have. Everything in the middle is on the table. And I've been asked, so what are the options? We can reduce the budgets proportionally with no adjustments in revenue. We could have a combination of budget reductions and adjust in the revenue budget. That could also consider the use of unassigned fund balance, or we could have no reduction in the budgets and just simply adjust the revenue budget, which also could utilize unassigned fund balance. All of them, the expenditure and the revenue budget has to be considered here. We can't just do an expenditure and not consider the revenue. I'm not asking, as chairman tonight, I'm not asking for anybody to necessarily weigh in on their opinion. And I'm largely doing that because we've had a lot of input tonight. We've had a long meeting. I think we need to take a little bit of time, unless anybody feels very, very strongly about it, but just indicating what our options are that we need to discuss to be able to move forward. Based on that, I would like to indicate, or I would like to get agreement from the Board of Finance to, not necessarily in a motion form, we could just request that the website be updated, that we request that the public comment period be extended through Monday, April 27th at 3 p.m. Again, I don't believe that needs any formal motion, but Tracy, Matt, if there's any formality to that, let me know, but otherwise I'd like to request out of the Board of Finance that hopefully they approve that.
I have a question about that, Mike. If people do attend our meetings, wouldn't we allow public forum at these meetings?
We did. Well, we did the beginning.
No, I mean after the 27th. I'm sorry. I should clarify.
After, yeah. I mean, we're gonna hold this meeting. We're gonna hold the similar meeting that we did the special meeting.
Okay, but we would stop taking the emails into the special.
At some point, I think we have to call it. Right? I think we have to have, we've set a date. This is one of those, typically it's, you set an extension when you don't get enough feedback. On this one, I think we're continuing to get feedback that we need to allow residents to continue to have their voice heard. That's my opinion on this. And especially with the fact that I don't know what it was, 6 or 7 came in after the deadline. I think it would be, I don't think it would be a good idea to not allow those in the record and at least consider those as well. And we have not seen them yet. They're going to be released as part of the next batch. So that would be the first request. And the second one was that I would have is to schedule a special meeting on April 27th at 7:30. We would do it by Zoom again. I think this worked out surprisingly well. At least I hope you all think so. If not, oh well. And the agenda for that would simply be the 2 public forums at the beginning and the end. And it would be to further, we wouldn't say further, but the agenda item would be to discuss and take possible action on fiscal year 2021 budget in relation to ... It's basically our item number 6. And just put that on a special meeting agenda.
I'm fine with that.
Second.
All right, for officiality's sake, ask for a motion to approve it, even though we don't need it. We're all in approval?
Yeah, I just did it.
All right, I know.
I think you can call a special meeting, Matt.
Yeah, we didn't need.
Mike.
Thank you, though, for the vote of confidence. I appreciate that. So those are the options we have. That's the meeting. Further public comment. Does anybody else have anything else before we continue to go on? Because we have 3 more items in public forum.
Mike, may I just say something? Katie?
Dr. Balistrese, go ahead.
So I would just like to thank my colleagues on the Board of Finance for the time they are taking with this decision, for the great deal of time they're taking to listen to public comment, and for the time that you are taking to listen to myself, to Dr. Freeman, to Mrs. Trudeau. As you can imagine, we on the Board of Education and in the Guilford Public School System are extremely aware of the difficulty that people in town are facing, and we are also extremely concerned about what happens to our students. So I think what you're hearing from us is a strong advocacy for the families in this town, for their children, and for their student experience. And but that is it. This advocacy is not made without the knowledge of what this pandemic is doing for some of the families in this town. You have an extraordinarily difficult decision to make, and I just want to express my deep gratitude for the process that you're taking, for the thoughtful approach, and for your diligence in kind of getting the public's questions answered, getting your own questions answered. And so I thank you for the invitation to be part of this conversation, and for the thoughtful listening of what we and Mr. Hoey on the town side have to share with you about balancing these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all you've done.
Oh,
yes, go ahead, Ken.
Oh, I didn't know that I was on with my
You're good.
my challenges. Is there a finality to the meeting that we have just agreed upon? I believe that the vote has taken place. Or if we find that we need another week to further our deliberations, is that available to us? I see you're nodding. So that we're hopeful of reaching a decision of some sort next week, but we're keeping the option open for a meeting perhaps on the first week in May.
We are continuing the dialogue and having a special meeting. That does not mean that we have to have a decision that night. Keep in mind, the Board of Selectmen have asked us to make a decision by May 5th. So
okay.
April 27th is going to be set, and if we need to go further another date, we will. Obviously, that could change, maybe, if there's a direction by the Board of Selectmen to extend that, which our first selectman has already indicated. But right now, we are following the direction of the Board of Selectmen based on their meeting and their vote. Matt, did you?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just an observation. In the number of years that I've been participating in this process, many of them alongside Mr. Gammerman, I don't think that the Board of Finance has ever received as much input on a budget as you have on this particular budget. I dare say that there hasn't been a annual budget meeting that has had more than half a dozen participants in 15 or 20 years. So Jonathan talked earlier to this, we're not equipped for the process. You've received, I believe as a board, you have received more input on this budget than you have than anyone's tenure on that board relative to it. And the other piece I wanted to address is, Bob, I think you mentioned it looks like there's a well-orchestrated campaign. Yes, there is probably a well-orchestrated campaign there, but there's one on the other side too. There have been emails shared with me that people have sent out rallying the cause on the other side as well. And I think some of you may have seen that as well. So yes, this is not a partisan issue. This is a passion issue where people feel strongly one way or the other. And unfortunately, the methodology that we have today is people can send emails as opposed to showing up at meetings. And apparently it's a little easier to do it that way than to come to meetings, which object lesson for all of us as we move past this virus stage. We will probably be contemplating how do we get this kind of engagement from the citizenry on a regular basis. Thank you.
That's a very good point, because the engagement we've had before any kind of a vote has been incredible. And I just want to I'm not going to go and repeat what was said, but I do want to thank the public regarding this line item before we move on, just to thank all the input. It's been gratifying to see so much active participation this year, despite the conditions. All right. What I'd like to do is move on to item number 7, committee reports, building permits. Yeah, I'm guessing there's probably not going to be much at this point in the meeting, but we're almost to where we were last year. Item number 8, old business. Item number 9, new business. Okay. Item number 10, public forum. Same rules apply regarding name, address. Anybody who would like to address the Board of Finance in public forum. What we will do is mute everybody, and if anybody has anything that they would like to say, please indicate by raising your hand. And I will...
Mike, can you let them know about the raise your hand function of the Zoom?
Yeah, it should be down at there should be a bar down the bottom that says reaction. No, is it reactions? No.
If they scroll down the bottom and they click on participants,
yes.
And when the list comes up, the raise your hand option should be in the right-hand corner.
Thank you for that.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Veronica.
Live and learn, right?
Yeah, I think the first time I was on Zoom, I found that a little tricky to find that.
All right, Tracy, do we have anybody who's indicated? No. Okay. All right. We have nothing further. Thank you, everybody. This has been quite the experience, and I will say it's really good to see all of you for a change.
Agreed.
So we will reconvene again at our special meeting on April 27th at 7:30. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Oh, come on.
I think so. Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Wash
night.
your hands.
Wash your hands.
Stay safe, everyone.